Title of this morning's Dharma talk. Tried to think of another way of saying it, but I don't know how to title this. So I'm just going to call it Intense Karma. Very strong, irrefutable movement, action. And I'm happy to respond to questions about this as soon as you have them. What I'm basically, the topic, the idea here is noticing, not only in my own life, but in the lives of people I talk to and endeavor to support or help with their awareness practice. There's some things you just can't argue with. You just can't. You can't even come up with an idea why something is even happening. Sometimes extremely confusing, even though some other situation right next to you is obvious what this caused that, so that's how you got your PhD. Or you did this and did this and did this, and that's how you ended up in the Michigan Department of Corrections. They have their similarities. Each of them are containers. But I'm sure you've noticed in your life there are sometimes people you meet, you don't even have to talk to them. As soon as you meet them, and it's not just how they appear, although it's difficult to separate it from that. Sometimes you meet people that you have a certain kind of a feeling for, and it could be attraction, and it could be indifference, it could be just feeling negative. Even if the person is extremely friendly and kind and nice and sweet and all that, just a strong negativity can arise with that person. One time, a while back, I know this doesn't happen anymore, but Shoka, our most recent fully ordained priest here, came into the Hojo and said, "Why do I always feel aggression when I look at you?" Do you remember that? Something along that line, probably paraphrasing. And I probably said something like, "Probably because you hate my guts." And as some of you know, we have done some work with that in deep consciousness, going into what is apparently, capital A, apparently past lives, apparently. So I'm not sure that's exactly how that works, but something is going on there, and it's worth investigating, and we aren't about to look the other way by having an opinion about it. Opinions are incredibly difficult, make it incredibly difficult to work with the world that is on the move all the time, arising and falling and showing up this way, showing up that way, changing colors, changing shapes, changing textures. It's quite a display. So what you hear me say quite often is, don't agree with it, don't disagree with it, and don't ignore it. And of course, the process of doing it is knowing how you can't help but go along with something. You can't help but be against something else. And you can't help but be just not interested or disinterested or distracted from another thing. But it's a little bit different when you're aware that you're doing that when it's coming out of awareness that you're not doing that. So that's why when I say that, as I've said many times, I know you can't help but do that. I can't help but do that. I can't help but accept, agree, disagree, and so on. It's a spontaneous kind of a arising that happens. It has something to do with the karma that seems to be coming from somewhere else. So it's interesting that whatever is occurring, that if you do nothing with it, that it won't, whatever is just showing up, we tend to solidify it out of fear. Oh my God, this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. Remember saying that to yourself? I can't believe this is happening. Anybody here not said that? Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Do you ever say, oh my God, I can't believe this won't happen? No, that wouldn't work. So we're always kind of perplexed and mystified by all kinds of things that are going on. If we're trying to pay attention and see what's happening, like how did you end up in this room? You can't find a first cause. I certainly don't know how I ended up sitting on a seat and being a Dharma teacher. Even 10, 12 years ago, I wouldn't have thought this was going to occur. And I didn't make it occur. I didn't bring it about. I just didn't get in the way of it. It just started to occur. I just didn't agree or disagree or look away. At least not very much. Initially, I disagreed. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to. I don't want to. It's not my job, man. And a lot of that came out of just feeling that I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I barely even understand it. And you might say, yeah, I've noticed that. But I don't understand. So I'm thinking of a particular situation where if you've been in love, which I'm sure you have, or maybe you are, or maybe you're going to be, there's some kind of, there's different levels of that. There's different levels of attachment and attraction and repulsion, and it just, you never have the same situation, even though sometimes someone who's been married a lot, like I have, will say, well, have you ever noticed that your mate is always that, you're always marrying your mother or something like that? That is not true. Not true. However, it is interesting how anytime you're with another person, pick 15 people, write their names down, and then just notice the difference in energy that happens with you and that other person. It might be strong attraction, love, it could be aversion, it could be all the nuances, all the different aspects or the combinations of things coming and going. And you will see that more and more and more the less you interpret it, add, elaborate on it, or do anything with it at all. It will start to show up in higher and higher relief. Because, why? Because you're not doing anything with it. You're actually getting, you could say, and I'm characterizing it this way, and maybe there's a better way, pure karma. The karma that's was actually caused, or actually did start in a particular way, a particular combination of 3,852,000 things all coming together, pushing this, pushing that, pulling this, shutting this down, raising this up, that end up in this moment. Here we are. Yes?
When you say higher relief, or the word relief,
Yeah.
Are you referring to contrast?
Yes. So that the emotion might feel even stronger. If you have no story about it, the stories protect us from things. The story about. It's because of this, because of that. The story could be just a description, which is not too bad, but this description always has a tone of voice that is condemning something or increasing something or changing it so it's more acceptable, like trying to put a banana through a doorway if the banana is 15 feet long. You have to turn it sideways. I just thought I'd help you with that. So, but it's that has that kind of a feeling to it, like the story. What is the story of the monkey trap with the bottle? They put some food in a bottle, and the monkey puts his hand inside the bottle and grabs a hold of the food, and then can't get his hand out. It's a monkey trap, but the monkey doesn't think, if I let go of the food, I can get my hand out. They won't let go of the food. Not about to let go of that food. I don't know where I was going with that, but I like monkeys, so that's probably why. They're quite interesting. So when you're going back to the high relief situation, if you can do it, and I think you can do it, I feel you can do it, I know you can do it if you're training your mind, if you're spending time sitting down, holding still. As I've said hundreds of times, you don't have to be a Buddhist. It would help to do that, because that's what this path is all about seeing what is true. Not believing, disbelieving, ignoring. Seeing what is true. Sit down, hold still, and watch what is false. Your thoughts. You have to watch the deception. You have to watch the falsehood. You have to watch your, whatever word is there, bullshit. Your thought patterns that come and go and come and go. About this, I like this, I don't like that, I shouldn't do, we shouldn't. I can't stand this anymore. I don't know how I'm going to do this. When you say, I don't know how I'm going to do this, or here I go again, you're actually preventing yourself from seeing the high relief that Shoshi is asking about. You're actually preventing yourself from from actually being a little bit more like, what term could I use? Maybe like a detective. You're actually shutting down on the investigation. You're saying, I don't want to look at that. I'm just going to I'm going with this. It's because of Fred did it. It's because of what Fred did. That's why I'm suffering this. Instead of, let's set that aside, put it on a shelf, and then look at the situation itself until you see it for what it is. Painful. That might be the only thing that you can't resist saying about it. This hurts. That's not so bad, because that's, as Trungpa Rinpoche, my first teacher, said, first thought, best thought. The very first thought you have about anything may not be true. It may maybe have some irregularities or something that you can't just use it as some kind of support to go further into the truth, but it probably won't be such a big lie that it prevents you from looking deeply into your conscious mind, into the structure of your particular, shall we call it, neurosis. So sitting practice of meditation is, as we've said many times, is deliberate dissatisfaction, just deliberately sitting down and having a willingness to just be dissatisfied, so that you can actually see that is, you can see the very nature of that, and rather than fighting with it ahead of time or trying to cover up the so-called symptom. Don't scratch your beard, I'll call on you. I can scratch my ear, though. Yes, Shoshi.
I'm not sure how to ask this, but so why do I take, or why do we take, or a collection of events and call it one thing, like Dharma teacher, for instance, or or negative energy, or I can't believe this is happening to me, that feeling.
That's good, yeah. I think we need, I think it's not about not doing that, but it's about being aware that those are causes and conditions that are arising that we're calling it one thing, like a Dharma practice, Dharma teacher. Every person in here is, even though we are all studying right now, studying meditation, studying awareness practice, there's all kinds of things that are going on with everyone, all kinds of thoughts that you'll never share with anybody in here, because it's about some furniture store in Utah that owes you money. You sent the furniture back and they never refunded. But you're not going to mention that to anybody. At least I never have. And that might not be a very good example, but it's like that kind of thing. So I think we, to come to your question, why we would say that is we can't just say 10,000 things. We have to bring this down to some kind of a naming or something about this situation or that situation. The idea is to be very aware that it's there's a lot of elements, a lot of aspects, a lot of facets, might be another way of saying, to that particular so-called thing. A lot of sides and so on. Just a way of getting a handle on it. And sometimes by doing that, we get swamped by the description. We get drawn into it, and we actually, you could say, disregard or forget what we're actually working with, and give ourselves a credential for working with the name rather than the thing that's being named. So
when you say intense karma, what's karma that's not intense?
Mosquito bite. Yeah, what did you do in the 16th century to that mosquito that he's biting you now? So it's just very little occurrences. They get stronger, and then, a flat tire is not horrible, but it's inconvenient. But then an intense thing, a car accident is more intense, especially if someone is killed or hurt or something. Then that's pretty intense. I know when I met Trungpa Rinpoche many years ago, he was in 1968. He ran into a joke shop. He was drinking and driving, I guess, from the way the story goes, and he lost control and paralyzed his whole left side. And I remember thinking when I met him, well, thinking about karma then, which I just had recently been introduced to the idea. Just wonder what kind of karma causes a person to be a teacher that is this amazing teacher, and yet is subject to running into joke shops and paralyzing them half of their body. And then then people would take that and say, well, make it into a story. Well, you notice that it was his left side that was, but the active side was left completely so so this was a message from the lineage that you need to teach, or something. People would go on and on and on about speculation about why this happened and how, and then he even referred to the Kagyu lineage as the mishap lineage. There's even a book on it, Mishap Lineage, that he wrote. It's about the lineage that there's all kinds of difficulties happening. But if you go and ask Kagyu monks about it, which I personally haven't done, but others have, they say, nah, I've never heard of Mishap Lineage. These are fully ordained in the Kagyu tradition. But then there are the 4 great and the 8 lesser schools just in the Kagyu lineage, not to mention all the other different orders and schools and different ways of working with everything from going to a mountaintop and sit there the rest of your life to go down and do prostrations until your knees break. So
in situations of particularly intense karma, what can be done to not blame?
So you have to see the way you will blame. Something will be happening, and we'll try to look for the cause. And it's not that there isn't some cause or some person that's causing. It's just that there's all kinds of things that are ignored. Anytime you go to blame, you ignore everything that created that particular thing you're blaming, or person you're blaming, or situation you're blaming. So you're bringing that into some. This is the difficulty with when we don't see dependent origination for what it is, when we don't see that everything's dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side as its own self, its own blame, or its own credit. You get credit for nothing. It'd be like going in the mirror if you looked like a movie star, going in, look in the mirror and think of what a wonderful job you did with yourself, or being in a terrible situation, being born into poverty or into crime family or something like that. And but these are when I'm talking about intense karma, I'm saying that's what I'm talking about. There's some area, just the karma that brings you into this room is pretty amazing. First there needs to be a room for this karma that brought you into this room, for it to have a room to go to. So there first has to be a teaching person. There has to be some kind of a lineage situation happening that's strong. Not sometimes people are concerned about some kind of personality cult, and people have accused Trungpa Rinpoche of leading a personality cult. I don't think so. I knew him. It was not. He just had incredible charisma, and he was kind of a homely guy. He was and was crippled, and you never thought of him as a handicapped. It's the last word you'd think about to describe him if you were describing him, even though he limped all over the place. I one time helped him into a car, and it's like he deliberately made himself weigh twice as much. He was heavy, and I'm like this, trying to hold him up and help him, and it's like he's just going. Probably my perception. But, so anyway, that was a long time ago. So I think it's necessary, and the reason I'm talking about this is I'm thinking of what brought it up. I'm talking to somebody who's a student of mine off in the distance, who's just having difficulty with someone they really care for, who's going through a lot of difficult stuff, and I'm pretty much saying, don't meddle. Don't meddle. It's not even though you can justify, well, I have to help them. It's like when somebody talks about suicide. Please respect the person's confusion, because if you try to come at it with your apparent clarity, all you do is make things worse for that person. I'm not saying you're going to cause them to take their life or something, but they need to get their own clarity around that. Just like sitting meditation, if somebody comes to me with with confusion about certain things, I know better than to go into territory in someone's consciousness without permission. It practically has to be an invitation, even though I can see a lot of spinning and craziness, because it doesn't work. You just reinforce the polarity that the whole, we'll call samsara, that the whole world is attached to, materialism. that doesn't mean it isn't difficult to be with somebody and watch somebody, destroy themselves with whatever, alcohol or drugs or something, or activity that's really harmful. I know what that's like. I was raised by people who were doing that, so I know what it's like. Of course, that's a little different situation as a child, but as an adult looking at it, you can't say, you might not want to do that anymore. You might not want to drink every single day. On the other hand, it's none of your business. It's none of your business. What is your business? Train your mind, please. Train your mind so that you become more and more and more clear. How does that feel? It probably is going to feel worse and worse, because you are looking at things you've been shutting down perhaps your whole life, and now because your attitude has changed, you're practicing an awareness practice, you are going to look at this. You're not going to settle for any kind of halfway ideas about it. You have to know that it's halfway, so you don't settle. It's a whole other teaching. I sometimes talk about halfway measures. You should actually practice the halfway measure so you know there is a halfway, which we never get there, of course, yes.
When it looks like things just get worse and worse, how can encouragement show up to practice?
Encouragement for you? You receive vows and you're asking for more of them. You ask for more of them. So that's what that's about. It's like you have to do it yourself. So you get help by, that's why we have lineages. That's why we have teachers. Some people go around and say, you don't need a teacher. All religions suck or whatever. And I'm not saying that every organization is going to have some kind of difficulty with it. But that's why we receive a vow, observe vows, so that we can, so when things we do go into a passage in our life where things just get totally gray and blurry and with no sunshine, so to speak, that we have that vow, return to that vow. First, contemplate the preciousness of being free and well favored. You can go to the first one of the 4 reminders and just say that to yourself, and contemplate each word, because it's and that helps take us into the fundamental situation that part of our karma is pretty good. We're here. We've heard these teachings, and you can scan the internet all day long, and if you can find Buddhism, you can find teachings, but you can't always find the situation that is going to support you to actually find out who you are. Go ahead.
Mariah in Texas has a question.
Mm-hmm.
She asks, does our individual clarity come solely from meditation?
Your individual clarity was here before you were born. And so the meditation practice, all it's doing is slowly, shows up different with different people, but show it slowly. So you're sitting down, you're holding still, you're looking at the craziness of the mind, and as we know, it's crazy, but you don't give up. You continue to look. You're reifying, emphasizing the awareness part of the consciousness rather than the thinking part, or the assuming part, or the constructing part, or the planning part, or all the other parts. You're just going to look. You're just going to receive whatever shows up. So I would say to Mariah and to anyone else that what happens is you're actually cutting through the whole clinging, the whole passion, aggression, ignorance aspects of the mind. It takes time to do it. You have to insist on seeing the truth yourself. And so it could be said you're more, as you do meditation practice, you're more uncovering the confusion. You're looking at the confusion so that it can't get any fuel. If you're looking at the confusion, then nobody can sneak in some shipments of ammunition, because you're looking at it, and you're not buying it, you're not selling it, you're not distracting yourself from it. Do nothing with it. And their whole practice can be about watching how you keep spontaneously out of fear, spontaneously out of hope, spontaneously out of ignorance, meddle with your own mind. Don't meddle with your own mind. Respect your confusion. Don't don't try to fix something from 3 blocks away. Look at it until there's no distance between you and what you're seeing. You're actually, this is what Rinpoche is saying, as far as I can tell. Be genuine. Be the neurosis you're trying to avoid. Be the confusion. This is to be with all things. Start with your own spinning mind. And you can't do that if you're covering it up with thought patterns and ideas and conversations and discussions. You hear there's some really, really intelligent people on the internet talking on that are not people who train their minds, but they're really smart. And I'd be silenced by listening to them because I can't participate in that. They're really, really smart, and they can talk about ideas and angles and philosophies and interpret everything and bring in Nietzsche and Schopenhauer and they said this and they said this and they said that, and bring in various historians to validate their ideas or psychologies. Not wrong, just circular. Really correct in its path. A circle always looks like a straight line if you're walking on it. You know, you're not walking on a circle and think, this is a circle. No, you think, bump, 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 bump. Or maybe, pump, 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 pump. Go ahead.
How do we know if we're confused?
Just ask me.
Am I confused?
Yep.
Am I unconfused?
Yep. No reference point. This is something that's difficult to, because in the midst of the drowning in the ocean, we think, you mean I don't need a rubber ducky or something out here to keep me from sinking? No, you don't. If you in our talking about what Shoto was asking about earlier, I say, return to the vow, return to your vows, or receive these vows, or if you don't do it officially, then just do it on your own. You don't need me to put a rubber stamp on your head. Do it on your own. I think it helps to be part of a lineage of 2,500 years going back. I think it helps a lot. I certainly couldn't do this without that. But you could just return to that resolve, just return to, I'm going to see this. I'm going to see this through. I'm going to see what it is. We tend to cover things up and then think that what we're looking at is the truth, or is this what we're dealing with, when actually we know we're looking at our idea about what it is. Your idea about it's like the example I give quite often is it's like looking at a recipe and thinking you're looking at food. It's really that big of a situation. If you're looking at food, you won't know what it is. How many times have you gone in the kitchen and looked in the bowl and said, what is this? And then Cody says, food. Or someone. It's like goulash. What is goulash? Does anybody know? Does anybody, if you're from, where's goulash made in? You don't know?
The
Anybody?
kitchen?
Good idea. That works, yes, sir.
What is the difference between the path and walking in a circle, thinking that you're walking in a straight line?
Well, the difference is if you're walking in a circle and walking in a straight line, you're reifying and establishing the correctness of what you're doing over and over by lecturing yourself and arguing with others and seeing how they can't quite think as clearly as you can. Still, it's just an idea, and so you keep on going. But go into retreat and see how long that works. But nobody to argue with, nobody to compare yourself with. That's why solitary retreats are quite helpful, especially if they're long. Especially if you're doing nothing for 8 hours a day, but sitting and looking at a wall feels quite silly.
Mariah has a follow-up question.
Yes.
2 parts, actually. Does enlightenment eliminate suffering, or are we still subject to live out our karma regardless of enlightenment?
Yes, you will have to live out your karma. It's just that there won't be a solid being doing it anymore. If you awaken, or if you realize dependent origination, which is what the Buddha saw, then the karma is still there. You're still going to trip over a log on November the 3rd, 2042. You're still going to have things happen, probably. Maybe not all of them. Some of them might change, but that shouldn't be any concern. What is a concern is, are you clear about what is right in front of you? If you're clear about what is right in front of you, you'll make no more decisions about anything. Decisions are just a sign that you're confused. You're confused about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. This doesn't mean that you can't choose apple pie over rhubarb. Yes?
Sometimes there can be kind of a resignation and declaring something, oh, well, it's just my karma.
That's extra.
So
That's not a good
how would we know if we're living out our karma or settling for what's happening to us?
I think you know. When you say how, I think it's just a matter of practicing, watching things unfold, watching things come towards you, and notice that what seems to show up is you're less and less confused about the confusion. Confusion doesn't go away. As it says, as Dogen said in the 13th century, if you go out towards the world and try to shape, change, modify, push this, pull this, this is called delusion and circular. But if the world just comes to you, the 10,000 things, as is sometimes the metaphor is used, then this is awakening. A simple way of saying just this. As far as Mariah's question, the other thing I would say about that is that it's going to show up different ways for different people, and it's difficult to respond to your question, her question, in such a way that is going to make any sense unless you're doing a lot of sitting meditation, because the tendency to go into it with concepts and ideas and a leaf rake and take care of everything that way is pretty overwhelming unless you're emphasizing through sitting meditation the spaciousness in which the leaves appear. You get no credential for it. You're not going to feel like you're more aware. You may feel like you're more confused because you can see more leaves. You can see more confusion. You can see more tornadoes, whirlwinds, tsunamis happening, but you're not doing anything with them. And so therefore the apparent self-centeredness that used to jump into the situation and try to sort things out, fix things, repair things, blame them, blame yourself, spiritual materialism, scientific materialism, cultural materialism, political materialism, just trying to take things that don't have a fundamental nature of duality and trying to make them work based on believing some things are right and some things are wrong. We're not saying there aren't things that are really painful and should not be occurring. Not saying that. So the idea there is that you would practice until it became clear what was happening. There's still going to be suffering, even though some teachings say otherwise. There's still going to be difficulty. You can't be a human being and have all kinds of nerve endings, including in the mind, and have people around you that are suffering intensely and are trying to cover up their suffering and not feel some of that strongly. It's misunderstood it could be misunderstood until there's some kind of a basic crack in the cosmic egg, until there's some kind of basic crack in the whole situation where you begin to see that this is nothing is separate. There's no praise and blame anywhere. There's no cause and effect happening on the level that I thought it was. So there's awakening, but there's no one who is awakened. There's confusion, but there's no one who's confused. This is called liberation, and it's available, and it's not an experience. It's not something you go from this to that. It's not separate, so there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do, as Kobun Roshi said. Yes.
Is there such a thing as a collective karma?
Yes.
It seems, as I look at the world politics, that there's a congregation of dictators that seem to be arising.
Mm-hmm.
Is that some kind of collective?
Yeah, it's just more of the same confusion happening.
So sometimes in light of that, it's hard to see what our individual sitting practice, how that can impact that bigger picture.
So don't approach it as in this way they're approaching the world, in a materialistic tit for tat way, or I did this to cause that, I'm doing this to have this happen. It's like, all the political things, and I'm not going to go into it and get in trouble with people for being political because I don't like to be in trouble. But I don't have to say anything about it. Just look at the intense right and wrong mentality from any side of the spectrum. It's rare to find anyone who's talking about training. Let's train our minds first. Let's train our minds while we're trying to think about it. Let's try to be clear about what this fundamentally is. Further questions?
We could have time for one more.
One more? How about a really good one? Not that the rest of them weren't good. Good. Yes.
How, you said to be genuine, to be your confusion,
Yeah.
your neurosis.
Yes. Yes.
How does that look? It doesn't mean acting out, does it?
Not at all. No, acting out is trying to avoid the situation. It's something happens and I gotta express my anger. How many times I have to do something with it, or I have to go jog or something, get rid of the energy. I'm not saying you shouldn't jog. I'm not saying you shouldn't express your anger, but be really aware. I don't know how any individual's karma is going to show up, but the more you can just be aware of what's happening without clamping down on it or trying to change it before you really see what it is. So you would just, those feelings, it's so difficult, as you know, all of us know, if you're feeling really bad about some particular situation, to not feel that that situation is causing this problem. It looks like it is. Sometimes we call that a trigger. Something happened that was little over here and suddenly we have this intense reaction. This is intense karma. There's some people, you notice just the people in this room. Just go around and look at everyone in the face for 30 seconds. You have a completely different kind of dynamic happening. Not separate. You're not separate from anybody's feelings, emotions. You're not separate from your own. You're not separate from anyone else. Some people are more sensitive than others. Quite often when people are really sensitive to that, they become introverts because it's just too painful to relate to other people. Too difficult because they're so receptive. They don't know what to do with all of that energy coming from others. So they don't want to be in a so-called social milieu where everybody's just having a good time and let me get upstairs. Some people call me an extrovert just because I wander around, and I'm not an extrovert, nor an introvert. There's no positionality happening over here anymore, other than intense fear. You think I'm joking? Are we at the end of our sojourn? We're going to take you to the train. You know that, okay? So don't leave. Don't be good on there and jumping on that train without us. Further? Okay.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our yellow chant books. I'd like to remind everybody we have donation boxes in the hallway and appreciate your financial assistance and depend on it. Please help us as you are able. We also take payments online through PayPal, checks in the mail, debit, credit cards.
May the merit penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho-san, shi-fu, shi-son bu-sa, moko-sa, moko-ja-oromi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.